My name's Allison, I'm 39, and I never thought a chance encounter could flip my life upside down. I live in Seattle, in a small apartment in Capitol Hill, overlooking a bustling street that smells of coffee from the nearby cafe every morning. I've got fiery red hair, usually tied up in a messy bun, a slim figure I keep up with long walks, and, as people say, a pretty face, though I've never considered myself a beauty. I work as a florist at a little shop called Bloom and Petal, making bouquets for weddings and events, which brings me joy. After my divorce from my ex, who was a total jerk, I swore off men. He left me with a pile of debt and a broken heart, and I vowed never to let anyone humiliate me again. That day, I was sitting in California Anderson Park, not far from my apartment. It's my favorite spot in the city, quiet despite being near downtown, where I often come with a book and my thermos of herbal tea. My thermos is old, metal, with a faded daisy sticker, but I love it. It reminds me of simpler times. I was on a bench, flipping through my book, but unable to focus. My mind kept drifting to my debts and how tired I was of being alone, even if I wouldn't admit it to myself. Then he showed up. Tall, muscular, his build obvious even under a gray hoodie, with light hair tousled by the wind and gray eyes that seemed to glow in the sunlight. His face was sharp, almost aristocratic, with a slight smile that made something stir inside me. He walked over, holding a water bottle, and said, "Hey, I noticed you from across the park. You look like a work of art among these trees. Mind if I sit?" I was caught off guard. Guys rarely approach me so boldly, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Thanks, but I prefer reading alone," I replied, trying to sound polite but firm. He grinned wider and said, "Fair enough, but I can't leave without knowing your name." "I'm Lucas, 24, and honestly, I can't take my eyes off you." I rolled my eyes, but his persistence intrigued me. He was 15 years younger, and I couldn't figure out what a guy like him wanted with me. "I'm Allison, and I'm too old for those kinds of compliments," I said, but he just laughed and sat down anyway. "Age is just a number, Allison. You're incredible, and I want to get to know you. Give me a chance, I promise I won't let you down." His voice was soft but confident, both annoying and magnetic. We started talking. He told me he's a fitness trainer at a gym nearby, dreams of starting his own business, and loves Seattle's vibe. I listened, torn between wanting to walk away and something in his gaze that made me stay. I left the park that day without giving him my number, but Lucas didn't give up. The next day, he was back with a bouquet of daisies, saying they reminded him of me. "I saw the sticker on your thermos. Thought you'd like these," he said, and I couldn't help but smile. He kept showing up with new compliments, stories, and jokes that made me laugh despite myself. I told myself it was foolish, he was too young, and I didn't want to get hurt again, but his persistence wore me down. 2 weeks later, I agreed to a date. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant near the park. I wore my best dress, dark green, accentuating my red hair, feeling awkward, but Lucas looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. "Allison, you're amazing, and I want you to be mine," he said, holding my hand. I looked into his eyes and said, "Lucas, I'm not someone who tolerates disrespect. I'm just a regular woman, and if you want to be with me, you need to treat me with respect. I won't let anyone humiliate me." He nodded, his face serious. "I get it, and I'll do everything to make you happy," he promised. That's how I became his. We started dating, and the first few months were like a dream. Lucas was attentive, passionate, saying beautiful things that made my heart race. "You're my inspiration, Allison," he'd whisper as we lay in my bed, his hands gliding over me while rain pattered outside. We spent days in the park where we met, sitting on that same bench, sipping tea from my thermos as he shared his dreams. At night, our chemistry was electric, so intense I forgot everything else. I thought I'd found true love, but I didn't know Lucas was hiding his real intentions. The first few months with Lucas were everything I could have dreamed of. Every morning, I woke up in my small Capitol Hill apartment, feeling the warmth of his body next to mine. Lucas would wrap his arms around me, his light hair falling over his forehead, his gray eyes gazing at me with a tenderness that melted my heart. "Good morning, my beautiful," he'd whisper, and I'd smile, forgetting all my past disappointments. We'd have breakfast together. I'd make omelets and he'd brew coffee, which we drank from my favorite daisy-patterned mug, the one that matched the sticker on my thermos. Those little moments made my life feel full, and for maybe the first time in years, I felt truly happy. Lucas seemed perfect. He'd take me to California Anderson Park, where we met, and we'd spend hours on our bench, sipping herbal tea from my thermos and talking about everything. He shared his plans to open a gym, how he wanted to make a mark in Seattle. "You inspire me, Allison. With you, I feel like I can do anything," he'd say, his words so sincere I believed everyone. We'd walk through the park hand in hand, and I'd catch envious glances from other women. Lucas, with his chiseled body and aristocratic face, looked like a model, and I knew I looked better than ever by his side. Our evenings were full of passion. We'd come back to my apartment, and Lucas would put on music, usually something soft, like old Fleetwood Mac songs. He'd pull me close, his hands gliding over me, and we'd dance in the living room as Seattle's signature rain fell outside. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he'd whisper, and I'd melt into his words. Our nights were intense, filled with love and desire. He knew how to make me feel wanted, and I gave myself to him completely, letting go of my fears. We'd spend weekends in bed, ordering takeout from the nearby Thai place, laughing at cheesy movies, and I thought this was what real love felt like. But over time, I started noticing odd things. Lucas began talking about money more often. At first, it was small. He asked to borrow a couple $100 for unexpected expenses, promising to pay me back in a week. I didn't think much of it. I had a little savings from working at Bloom and Petal for emergencies. But then the amounts grew. He said he needed more clients at the gym to get ahead and asked me to help with advertising. "Allison, you know I want to start my business. If you chip in a bit, we'll be partners," he said, his gray eyes so full of hope I couldn't say no. I gave him $5,000, part of my savings for apartment repairs, and he swore it would pay off. Then he started mentioning my apartment. "You know, Allison, your Capitol Hill place is a gold mine. If you sold it, we could buy something bigger, together," he said one day while we drank tea in the park. I looked at him, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Lucas, this apartment is all I have." "I'm not selling it," I replied, trying not to show how much his words stung. He smiled, but there was something off in his expression I couldn't quite place. "Of course, I just thought we could plan a future together," he said, but I couldn't shake the feeling he was hiding something. My suspicions grew when I found a note in his backpack, which he'd left at my place. It had numbers, calculations, and words that stopped my heart. "Allison, easy target, 6 months, money plus apartment." My face flushed with anger. It looked like a plan, and I was the mark. I thought back to how he approached me in the park, his persistence, all those sweet words. Was it all a lie? I decided to dig deeper. I started checking his phone while he slept, and soon I found a text to his friend. "She's hooked. I'll get everything I need soon." Experiments a success. I sat in my living room, clutching that note, rage boiling inside me. He was using me. All this time, I was an experiment, a way to scam me for my money and apartment. But I wasn't going to let him win. I decided he'd pay for this, and pay dearly. I started planning how to take back what was mine and make him regret ever messing with me. I lay in my bed in my Capitol Hill apartment, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. The truth about Lucas crushed me. His texts calling me an easy target and an experiment haunted me. I kept replaying how he approached me in the park, his gray eyes seeming so sincere, his compliments making me feel special. It was all a lie. He manipulated my feelings to steal my money and apartment, and I couldn't forgive myself for believing him. But I wasn't giving up. I decided he'd pay for this, and I'd do whatever it took to take back what was mine and ruin his life. The next day, I confronted him. Lucas came over after his gym shift, acting like nothing was wrong, a smile plastered on his face. He walked into my living room, holding a water bottle, and said, "Hey, my beautiful, how's your day going?" I glared at him, rage bubbling inside me, and said, "Lucas, I know everything. I found your notes, saw your texts. I was just an experiment, right? You wanted my money, my apartment." His smile vanished, his gray eyes narrowing. "Allison, seriously?" "It's just a misunderstanding," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't lie to me. You're a jerk, and I won't let you get away with this." I grabbed my Daisy mug, the one we used for morning coffee, and hurled it at the wall. Shards scattered across the floor, and Lucas flinched, his face twisting in shock. "You'll regret this," I said, and he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. But that was just the start. Lucas moved faster, like he knew I wouldn't back down. He'd already gotten $5,000 from me for his business, but now he was after my apartment. He forged documents using my info, which I'd left on the table while we were together. He faked a sale of my apartment through some shady contact, and I found out when new owners showed up. A middle-aged couple started carrying boxes into my living room while I stood in the doorway, dumbfounded. "What are you doing?" "This is my apartment," I shouted, but they showed me papers with my signature, forged, of course. My world collapsed. Lucas had conned me so blatantly I lost everything. My apartment, my savings, my sense of safety. I packed my things into an old suitcase and moved to a cheap rental room on the outskirts of Seattle, where the air smelled of dampness and the walls were stained with mold. But I wasn't done. I started a war. I knew where Lucas hung out. He was still working at the gym and often visited California Anderson Park, where we met. I followed him, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, I saw him in the park, sitting on our bench with a new girl. They were laughing, his hand in hers, and rage surged through me. He looked as confident as the day he first approached me, and it infuriated me. I walked up, clutching my old thermos, and said, "Remember me, Lucas?" He turned, his face paling, while the girl looked at me, confused. "Allison, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his voice shaky. I smiled, cold and calculated. "I'm here to take back what's mine," I said, and poured hot tea from my thermos onto his hand. He yelped in pain, clutching the burn as his skin reddened, and the girl screamed, running off, leaving him alone. "This is just the beginning," I said, walking away, adrenaline pounding in my veins. I kept going. Through a friend at Bloom and Petal, I learned Lucas had pocketed money from my apartment sale and was trying to cash it out. I hired a lawyer recommended by the same friend, and we started fighting to reclaim my property. It was tough. Lucas's forged signatures were convincing, so I had to gather evidence of his scam, old texts, notes, neighbors' statements confirming he'd been at my place, and bank records showing his transfers. The legal battle dragged on for months, and during that time, I found ways to mess with his life. I learned where he kept his stuff from old messages I found on my laptop. One night, I snuck to his rented house on the city's edge and broke the lock on his car, leaving it open on the street. By morning, it was gone, and I knew it hit him hard. He always bragged about his old pickup, his baby, which he'd driven me in on our early dates when I still believed he was genuine. I kept the pressure on. I spread word among his gym clients, hinting he was scamming people, taking money for training sessions he never held. I'd visit the gym posing as a client, chatting with others and casually saying things like, "Heard this Lucas guy took money for personal training and bailed." His reputation tanked, and I watched him lose clients one by one. Some even left angry online reviews, calling him a fraud, and I knew it stung his ego. He started looking worn out, his perfect looks fading, and I relished knowing he was finally feeling what it's like to lose everything. But I wanted more. One night, I waited for him outside the gym. He was leaving after his shift, heading to a bus stop since his car was gone. I hid in a dark alley with a metal pipe I'd found nearby. As he passed, I swung at his legs, hard enough to make him collapse, crying out in pain. "That's for everything you did, you jerk," I said, standing over him. I didn't want to go too far, but I wanted him to remember this. His leg was badly hurt, and I knew he wouldn't be training anyone anytime soon. His career, his pride, was crumbling. Lucas went into hiding, moving to another part of town, but I didn't stop. I kept fighting for my apartment in court, all while finding ways to make his life miserable. I was ready to do whatever it took to take back what was mine and destroy him, just like he destroyed me. After months of fighting, I sat in the courtroom downtown in Seattle, clutching the old chamomile thermos that had become my talisman in this war. I watched the judge, an older woman with gray hair, flipping through the documents and felt my heart pounding in my chest. My lawyer, a young woman named Kate, who I'd found through a friend at Bloom and Petal, sat beside me and gave my hand an encouraging squeeze. Finally, the judge looked up and announced the decision. My apartment in Capitol Hill was officially returned to me. I'd proven that Lucas had falsified the documents, and his acquaintance who'd helped with the sale was held responsible. I'd lost all my savings, $5,000 I'd given him for his business, and that still stung, but I had my home back, and that was what mattered most. Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks when I heard the verdict. I'd done it. I had won. Lucas disappeared from the city immediately after the trial. I heard from his former clients at the gym that he'd packed his things and left Seattle without telling anyone where he was going. His leg, which I broke that night outside the gym, still hadn't healed, and he was limping when he left town. He'd lost his job, his reputation, his clients, everything he had. I didn't feel sorry for him. He deserved it for what he'd done to me. I wanted to ruin his life, and I did it. He ran away like a coward, and I knew I'd never see him again. Sometimes I pictured him in some backwater town, working for peanuts, with his broken leg and shattered dreams, and it gave me a dark satisfaction. But I didn't want to think about him anymore. He was in the past, and I was ready to move on. I went back to my apartment in Capitol Hill, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. I spent a whole week cleaning it up. I washed the floors, which had gathered dust during my absence, painted the walls a light green, which I'd always loved, and hung new curtains with a floral pattern that reminded me of the daisies on my thermos. I bought some new flower pots, violets and orchids, and placed them on the windowsills to bring the apartment to life. My job at Bloom and Petal helped me stay afloat, and I slowly began to rebuild my life. I even started the habit of drinking tea in the mornings on my balcony, looking out at the bustling street, where the smell of coffee from the nearby coffee shop still lingered. But there was still a void inside. Lucas had left scars not only in my wallet, but also in my heart. I swore to myself that I would never let a man treat me that way again, but loneliness still weighed on me, and I often caught myself thinking that I missed the feeling of someone looking at you with warmth. One morning, I went to California Anderson Park, where it all began. I sat on the same bench where Lucas had first approached me and drank herbal tea from my thermos, looking at the trees that were beginning to turn yellow with the arrival of autumn. The air was cool, and I wrapped myself in my old scarf, which my mom had knitted a long time ago. I tried to read a book, but my thoughts kept returning to the past, to how I trusted Lucas, how he'd ruined my life, and how I fought to get it back. And then I noticed a man sitting nearby on another bench, absorbed in a book. He didn't look like Lucas at all, of average height, with dark, slightly tousled hair, and wearing a simple gray jacket. In his hands, he held an old, battered copy of Pride and Prejudice, and something about his calm manner caught my attention. I felt like I wanted to talk to him. For the first time in a long time, I decided to make the first move. I stood up, adjusted my scarf, and walked over to him, holding my thermos in my hands. "Hi, I'm Allison. I noticed your book. I love Jane Austen. Do you mind if I sit down?" I asked, trying to sound confident, although everything inside me was trembling. He looked up, and I saw that his eyes were brown, warm, with a kindness that I so desperately needed. He smiled and said, "Of course, sit down." "I'm Daniel." We started talking, and I learned that he was 35. He worked as a librarian at the local library, loved books, history, and long walks. He was smart, thoughtful, and there was no pretense in his words. "You know, Allison, you look like someone who has been through a lot, but still believes in good things," he said, and I felt my heart tremble. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to open up. I told him about Lucas, how he deceived me, how I lost everything, and how I fought to get my apartment back. Daniel listened attentively, without interrupting, and then said, "You are incredibly strong, and you deserve someone who will truly appreciate you." His words were so simple, but they touched me to the core. We started dating. Daniel was the complete opposite of Lucas. He didn't rush things, respected my boundaries, and always found time to listen. We spent evenings at my apartment, reading books, drinking tea from my thermos, and he told me about his favorite authors. He loved to cook, and we often made dinner together. His signature dish, pasta with pesto sauce, became my favorite. I adored how he furrowed his brow when he was concentrating on a recipe, and how he laughed when I accidentally spilled sauce on the table. We walked in California Anderson Park, and he held my hand, but not to show off, but because he was genuinely happy with me. Sometimes we sat on the same bench where we met, and I noticed that I no longer thought about Lucas when I looked at the trees. Daniel helped me forget the pain. A year passed, and I realized that I was happy. Daniel and I moved into my apartment in Capitol Hill, and I started working on a new project, opening a small flower shop, which I'd always dreamed of creating. I named it Chamomile after the sticker on my thermos, which had become a symbol of my struggle and a new beginning. Daniel supported me every step of the way, helped with the business plan, and even made the sign for the shop himself, cutting the letters out of wood. We spent our days working on the shop and our evenings together, reading or just talking. I watched Daniel reading aloud to me while I prepared a bouquet for a customer and thought that life had given me a second chance. I was ready for it, and I knew that I would no longer let the past define my future.